Hey there, FlossTube. This is Cathy, the hands-on designer. I am just going to do a quick little intro for the tutorial that is to follow. The tutorial is for my pillow finish for the new triple play pillow series. And this is the first chart, the summer basket. And I'm here at my sewing table, so I thought I'd give you a different view around my room. And I wanted to, the reason why I'm coming to you with a little bit of an intro is if you're used to my tutorials, you know, some I do in video form, some I've done kind of like a classroom setting. I also have some static tutorials that are on my website. And this is a little bit different, mostly because I knew what I wanted these to look like when I was designing and developing this series. But I don't write quilt patterns. I write cross stitch patterns. So I can quilt and I can follow directions and I can come up with things out of my head. But I had to sort of back into the look that I was going for with these, which is why I am doing this video the way I'm doing it. I took a lot of pictures as I went and I took a lot of notes. And so we've culled it down to the pictures that I feel walk you through the journey the best. And I voiced over so I could kind of walk you through the process and, you know, insert a few tips and hints there along the way. So kind of like a classroom setting, but also maybe a little bit more like a PowerPoint. I don't know, but I still think it's hopefully entertaining. I do suggest that you watch the tutorial first before you sit down to finish. That way you'll kind of, you know, it'll be more of a refresher when you actually go to finish. Very simple quilting. It's just a variety of fabrics, and as I explained in the video, the slides that the ladies at Simple Stitches Fabric Shop put this bundle together, did a little bit of big stitch quilting. Again, all that I'll talk about more in the tutorial, but I kind of wanted to give you a little heads up about the slightly different format, and it was a lot of fun to do, and it allowed me to kind of be creative and get the look that I wanted, but not necessarily filming and having to go back and edit all my oops. So please don't let the quilting scare you off. It's really a lot of just straight lines. It's very simple. If you're an accomplished quilter, this should be no problem for you. In fact, I can't wait to see what you come up with. And when you go ahead and post your finishes, please, as always, hashtag hands-on design, and so I can go and check it out and give you a little golf clap and say yay. And if you use any part of this, or you get the idea for this from this video for a technique of your own or a video of your own, you know, please let people know where you got your initial inspiration. I do appreciate that. And again, I like to go and check it out and practice my golf clap and just and have fun with it. So I'll leave you to the video. Welcome to the tutorial for the triple play pillows. The steps in this tutorial are going to show you the fabrics, materials, and colors that I used for the first chart in the series, the summer basket. I do intend to use the same finish for all the seasons remaining in the series, and I hope that you enjoy this process. Let's get ready. The first thing that you're going to want to do is pick out some different fat quarters. In this case, I chose 8 different colors. These were put together by the ladies of Simple Stitches Fabric Shop. I gave them the DMC numbers, and they know that I like to use a variety of prints and colors and textures. And you'll see I have several whites, 3 blues, different values, colors, large prints, small prints, scatter prints, that type of thing. Only thing I'm going to caution you is that maybe I wouldn't use a very obvious stripe or maybe a large plaid. Let's get ready. The first thing you're going to want to do is what I show you here is I kind of played with my different squares and I played with the fabrics to kind of get the combination that I really liked. Now, some of you might say, well, that red fabric isn't really red. It's actually quite orangish. But I like to play with color, and don't be afraid to have similar-ish colors, same family, but not necessarily entirely matchy-matchy. Generally, if a fabric combo speaks to me and it works with the stitching, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to match entirely. So I love these grunge fabrics because they blend beautifully, and that's a good word for it. Make sure that your fabrics are a good blend and complement your stitching. Here's another combo that I was looking at. Again, I just really liked the fact that I picked up on some of the minor colors in the stitching with some of the quilting cottons. This is a fun part of the process for me is choosing the final fabrics. A little tip, if you're struggling and you're not exactly sure what fabrics to use, take a picture with your phone. The eye processes that color a little differently, and if it's pleasing to you in the photo, you will end up liking in most cases, the finished product. I often do that with my framing when I'm framing something as well, if I'm choosing mats in a frame. All right, let's get ready to get our fabric squares, our stitching squares ready. I've grabbed my ruler here. I really like this ruler that has the yellow color to it because it's not only clear, but the yellow color helps me see the markings on the ruler very well. I also have my red friction marker. If you're not familiar with these, they are very handy gadget to have for both quilting and cross stitch. They do erase with there's usually a nub on the other end that I can rub on it and make the line disappear, or with an iron, which is usually what I do. What I'm doing here is, as you can see, I'm lining my ruler up on the 3/8 inch mark. So it's on the very outer edge of the stitched image, so that the line I will be drawing is 3/8 inch away from the stitching. And yes, I am marking on the front of my linen. A lot of times when we do this, I'm typically marking on the back of my linen. Well, number one, I know the line will disappear, as I said, with heat, but this is creating a sewing line for me, as you'll see in the steps ahead. All right, that's what the line looks like once I have drawn it. The friction markers come in a variety of colors. I obviously chose the red so that it showed up easily on the linen that I stitched on. This photo shows what it looks like when I have completed my lines on all four sides of the linen, marking 3/8 of an inch away from the stitched image. And I'm taking my linen now and I'm laying it on a piece of cotton muslin. I like to keep some muslin on hand in the studio for finishes just like this. Anytime I am making a pillow finish or say a stocking finish, I always line my stitching with muslin to help give it reinforcement. So I like to keep white and a natural color and even darker grays and blacks for when I'm stitching on those dark fabrics as well. I want you to sew a line. We're going to attach the linen to the muslin by sewing with your sewing machine on that red line that you created. This photo shows you what the back side will look like when I've done that. Now you have a sewing line that we will use as a reference in all the steps that are to come. And let's go ahead and trim the excess linen and muslin. In this case, I used my ruler again and my rotary cutter, and I lined up on that red friction line again, 3/8 of an inch away from, or right on the 3/8 inch mark on the ruler, and then cut my straight line. Now, in most cases, when you quilt and do that type of thing, we work with 1/4 inch seams a lot. But as I said in the beginning, I was kind of backing my way into how I wanted this finish to come about. So I chose to use the 3/8 inch mark, knowing that I could trim more later. But as I go through the process, you'll see I get a little more comfortable and I go straight to the 1/4 inch. But this way we can always trim more off if I made a little oopsie or something like that. And that's what it looks like when I've trimmed 3/8 all the way around all four sides, and I'm ready to start putting the edges of my fabric together to make my quilt square. Okay, I am ready to cut my fabrics, my chosen fabrics, into strips and start adding them to the sides of my stitching to make a quilt square. We're going to call it a quilt square in this case because, well, basically that's what it's going to become once we've added the quilting fabric. I want my first two strips to be the red fabric and the blue fabric. So what I do first is with the red fabric, and I do the fabrics on the opposite side. So here first we're going to work with the red fabric, and out of that fabric I'm going to cut two pieces 3.5 inches wide by 7 inches. If you look at the photo, you'll say, well, that's a little bit longer than 7 inches. Yes, it is. As I said before, I was backing my way into this one. 7 inches is just fine. Of the blue fabric, I'm going to want to cut those two pieces 3.5 inches by 12 inches, and you'll see why the difference in the lengths. So I've got let's talk about the red strip first. I've got that right side up, and then I lay my stitching down on top of it, stitching side down, and I line up the two edges. This is where that seam that I sewed to attach the linen to the cotton muslin comes in handy, because I'm going to use that as a sewing guide. And again, we talked about the 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to go with a 3/8 here. Again, just kind of figuring on this end, it just worked out fine. So I'm going to go ahead and sew on that line and attach the red fabric to the stitching, and then attach on the opposite side as well. Now in this photo, you will see that I did back my red fabric down just a little bit. So on the red fabric, there probably really is a 1/4 inch seam and the 3/8 on the linen side. Again, since I was figuring in this process, I wanted to preserve as much of the width as possible. You'll be fine if you just want to line up your edges and stitch. You'll actually be fine if you go with 1/4 inch instead of cutting 3/8 inch as well. So this photo, as I said, shows you with my opposite sides of red attached to my stitching. Then you're going to want to press that red fabric back, and this shows how one of the red side fabric strips is pressed away from the stitching, and I'll do the other side as well. Once you have pressed both pieces of your red fabric back away from the stitching, we're going to want to trim that to fit. So I've taken that ruler and I've lined it up on the straight edge of the linen piece, and I'm going to cut straight across and cut those excess tabs of the red fabric off to make that all line up. And then I'm going to turn it over, and I need to remark my red line so I have a new sewing line. So again, I lined my ruler up on the seam line that I had when I attached the linen to the muslin. That line really does come in handy through this process, and I'm just going to go back over that line again so I can see it as I'm sewing, and I'm going to extend that line through the two red sashes on either side, the two red borders on either side. And now I have my sewing line. So I've cut my blue fabric now, and again, I said I cut those 3.5 inches wide by 12 inches long, and I'm lining up my edges, and I'm getting ready to attach my two blue sides. This is what it looks like when I've attached the first side, and then I've pressed it back away from this previous red fabric and the stitched area. I'm really liking the way this one is turning out so far. I'm liking the way the colors are playing. And I'm ready to attach the blue on the opposite side, as you can see. Okay, once the fabric is framed, the stitching is framed with the blue and the red, I am ready to cut my pieces for my corners. And I chose the white fabric here. And I will say, if there's a fabric that you don't, your corner pieces will end up being somewhat dominant in the finish. So if there's one that you're really hoping is going to be, say, an accent fabric, you like it for the color, but you don't want to see too much of it, don't use that as your corner piece because you will see a lot of it. It'll be the largest of all the triangles, as you'll see in the end. I cut these pieces, the corner strips, 4.5 inches wide by 9 inches, and you'll need 4 of them. Now, here's where it helps to have a ruler with some different angles marked on it. I specifically want the 45-degree line, and I lined that up. I'm getting ready to trim my corners so I can give it that angled look. So I took the 45-degree line and lined it up along my seam where the blue fabric met the linen. And then you'll notice at the top, I've got a dot, a 1/4 inch mark, that is right where the red fabric and the blue fabric meet at the corner, because I do, as I said, I'm getting a little more comfortable with the 1/4 inch, so I want a 1/4 inch seam here. This is just a close-up to show you what I was talking about, how that dot meets right at the corner where the red and the blue fabric meet. That's a 1/4 inch. So I want that to be, when I trim this, I want to be, if I then sew a 1/4 inch seam, I'll end up right at that corner point. And there I've trimmed my seam. And you can see what a nice angle that creates. We're going to complete that on all 4 sides. So now I get, you can start to see where this is all taking shape, where my borders have become triangles, and I'm going to attach the corner pieces, and we'll be trimming that to make triangles as well. This would even be kind of fun if you say, hey, I just really like this and I'm going to leave it this size. It'd be a small pillow and you wouldn't even need to attach the corner pieces. And you could turn it so that your stitching would actually be on point or at an angle. And the strips that you initially sewed on would become your corners. But I didn't do that, so let's keep moving. So here's where I'm lining up one of my corner pieces, the white corner piece that I cut that was 4.5 by 9, and I'm lining it up against the edge of this of the fabric that I just cut. I just trimmed. And I flipped that whole combo over so you could see what it looked like from this side too. I find we're all visual people and we like these. What's it supposed to look like on that side? So if I sew with a 1/4 inch seam here, my seam will go, the sewing line, the seam will go right through that corner and create a nice look on the front. All right, so here you can tell I have actually sewn that white strip on and pressed it back, and I'm ready to trim it. And actually, if you kind of take a peek at the lower left corner, you'll see that I've actually attached 2 pieces of the white for 2 corners, and I like to work on opposite sides. It's just sort of the way you should do this. There's always kind of an order. We tend to go side to side to side to side, and you'll see why as we cut this. So now I'm cutting the white to create the corners, and I've lined my ruler up again. It's following the line. It's parallel to the line that I created with the red fabric on the linen, and then it lays just at the top point of the red triangle so that I'm creating that 45-degree angle. And here is a close-up so that you can see again that my ruler is lined up, running parallel with where the red fabric was sewn to the linen, and then I've got the far right edge laid right at the tip of that red triangle. So I'm going to trim that there to create a nice edge of my square. So I trimmed that first edge. Now I'm going to trim the other side and line it up the same way. Make sure that my ruler is running parallel to where the blue fabric meets the linen, and I'm at the outer tip of the blue triangle on the outside edge. Now, once I've cut the first side, you'll actually notice that I'm using that as a guide as well on the ruler to make sure I'm getting a nice square corner. And this is what it should look like when I cut my first 2 corners. So you can start to see the square taking shape. I'm going to attach my final 2 sides to create my final 2 corners and get complete my square. And this is what that looks like before I trim those final 2 corners. I've attached the final 2 strips, and I've pressed them back away from the stitching. Pretty much when I press my seams, I'm always going to press them away from the stitching. I don't do, with something like this, I'm not doing it like opening my seams to press. And here you can see the completed quilt square. I've trimmed all 4 corners now, and I've got those nice corner triangles. And here you can really see how those corner triangles really are the largest fabric that in appearance. So again, definitely, as I said before, when you're picking your fabrics in the order how you would like them to be, make sure that the one that you really like, or if you're trying to kind of hide one, don't make that your corner because you will see that the most. Now I decided that I wanted to add some big stitch quilting to these pieces. I had always intended that I would do some sort of quilting, layer with batting and do some sort of an embellished quilting through the cotton fabrics. And I've kind of been reading up a lot about big stitch quilting for a while, and it's kind of something that has been interesting me. And I knew that I would do something at some point, but then I got the idea from the gals at Simple Stitches Fabric Shop, the ones who put this fabric bundle together for me. They actually took one of my complimentary cross-stitch designs, and it was stitched in black and white thread on a pink linen. And then they finished it with fabric, with black and white fabrics. And then they embellished the fabric with some big stitch quilting in pink floss. And it really struck me. I just loved the dimension of it. I loved that added color. It added to the texture, and it just became another component of the design. So I chatted with the gals and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this to these pillows. You okay with that? And they thought it was a great idea. So here I am marking some quilting lines. Again, I've got my ruler out and my friction pen, and all I'm doing is I'm just marking the lines that I'm going to want to use for some of my big stitch quilting. And this is a hand quilting. So what I've done is I knew I wanted some lines going through those corners to kind of give those some poof or some dimension. So I started with the first line, that top line, the one that basically is kind of in the middle of your screen. That is a 1/2 inch away from the seam of the blue corner. And then each line from there is 3/4 of a way, all the way down to, let's say, I guess I was able to fit 4 lines. Here you can see that I added some other quilting lines. I did another long diagonal one through the white, the red, and just a hair into the linen. That is a 1/4 inch away. So then that gives me, that kind of creates that visual of all those diagonal lines in the corner are each 3/4 of an inch away. And then I did some additional little lines inside each of the red triangle and the white triangle, all pretty much a 1/4 inch away from the seam. I didn't do a lot of stitching through the linen. I didn't want it to take for big stitch quilting. I didn't want it to take away from the cross stitch. So you really just kind of use whatever, lines you might think would be pleasing to you. I really did very minimal here. A lot of times when you do the quilting, that's what's meant to help hold the batting and the backing together. This is really just decoration. So I didn't want that much, but enough to make it worth the effort. Here's a photo that shows how I was doing my big stitch quilting. I did use 3 plies of the DMC. It was one of the colors that I used to stitch the actual pieces. This is one of the tealy colors. And there's many videos, YouTube's videos about big stitch quilting. I suggest you take a peek at those. It's really a fun technique. It's quilting. You just take bigger stitches, hence the name big stitch quilting. The biggest thing I really tried to do was make sure that my stitches were evenly spaced and also even in depth. And I will admit it was a little hard for me to kind of take the big stitches. When I've hand stitched before, it's usually all about teeny tiny perfect little stitches. This was just kind of fun because it really didn't take that long. I knew it was meant to be an embellishment. I probably pulled a little extra harder to let it pucker a little bit because that's part of the look I was going for. And it was really just kind of fun. And a lot of times too in quilting, we're picking a thread that sort of blends into the background. I purposely chose a thread that would stand out because again, I wanted it to be a design element. I go back to what I was telling you, how they picked a pink thread on black and white fabrics, and it was just gorgeous. So here's all 3 of my blocks. And I guess I should remember to say, please put your quilting or your block on a piece of warm and natural batting. So you big stitch quilt through the 2 layers, through the cotton and through the muslin. This is a warm and natural muslin. It's a thin muslin, batting. And it's what I use for most of my finishes. And you can see here I chose a different floss color for each of the pillows. Some blend a little bit more, some pop a little bit more. That was just what was fun about this, is I knew each of these would have an individual look, but they would all coordinate, and I really wouldn't have to think about them when I pulled them out to decorate with them. So here I'm going to trim away the excess batting from each quilt square. At this point, I was kind of trying to figure out how big I wanted my pillow, and these ended up being about a 10-inch block, which was a little bit bigger than I wanted. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. I just really needed to trim away the excess just to kind of get a better visual on what it was I was working with here. So as I said, I did decide that I didn't want a 10-inch pillow. I wanted it just a little bit smaller than that because I wanted them to fit into a basket, hence the summer basket. So I did trim it down to 9 inches. So the effect here was that I did lose a little bit of the tip of my red and white fabrics. I was okay with that. It was, again, the look that I was going for. And it was the size that I wanted. If you wanted to keep it the 10-inch, you would certainly be able to do that. Now I'm ready to create the back side of my pillow. We're going to make an envelope style of pillow because I want to be able to take the pillow insert in and out of each season as we go to help with storage. Now, so with the envelope style, I needed to choose I make 2 sides to the backing. Because I was working with fat quarters and I didn't have one large piece left, I thought, well, this will be kind of fun to mix up the different prints and create 2-tone backs. And again, I just thought it was fun, and nobody really sees the backs, and that way if somebody does go and pick them up and go, hey, I want to look at this pillow, oh, how fun, all the fabric coordinates. Just a little something. So I've cut 2 pieces here, 6 3/4 by 9, and these are for the 2 back pieces. And again, if you chose to keep your pillows the 10-inch size, you would want to make these 6 3/4 by 10. 9, in my case, is the width of my pillow front. And you can see here on the red fabric, I'm just going to point this out because I know somebody's looking at it, that because it does have a grid, you can see I'm not perfectly square. Because this is a small enough print, I'm not really concerned about that. If it was a larger stripe or plaid and it was really off and your eye was drawn to it, that would bother me, and I would take a little bit more effort to make sure that I was perfectly square. But this I'm okay with. I'm also going to layer my backing pieces so that the red is not the dominant. So if that would bug me in the slightest, well, I wouldn't see it as much. So I'd be okay with it. So what you'll want to do here is, this is pretty simple, is I just pressed my pieces, and I folded on the 9-inch side, I folded it over 1/4 inch and then folded it over again so that I wouldn't have any raw edges. And then I just sewed right down through the middle of that to secure it in place. Then with my right side up on my pillow square, I laid the first backing piece down for the back envelope. And you're going to go, wow, her line's not really straight. I'm okay with that. It's the back of the pillow. This is meant to be a fun project. Just, enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, and just have fun with it. So you'll notice I put my blue down first. So when I turn my pillow right side out, this will be the dominant fabric. Remember, I kind of talked about that in the previous slide. I lay my second piece down, just kind of making sure it matches up with all the outside edges of my pillow front. I'll put some pins through there, and then I'm going to sew all the way around it with a 1/4 inch seam. As I said, I've now gotten enough confidence in what I'm doing. I'm comfortable with the 1/4 inch seam. Here's the ubiquitous trim your corners. You'll notice I've just trimmed to remove a little bit of the bulk. I really don't have much bulk in any other areas of the pillow since we've got mostly straight lines. So really the corners are where I'm going to focus my attention. You're going to want to turn it right side out. Give it a nice little press. Poke your corners out a little bit. Here's a nice kind of close-up shot of what the edging of one of my pillows is going to look like with that fun big stitch quilting. That was so much fun to do. And here's all 3 of my pillows once I've completed the big stitch quilting and put my envelope style back. And you'll see how they lay nice and flat. And this was my intent with this series, so that we're going to make a pillow form next. And when this particular season is not in season, these will just lay nice and flat, and you can tuck them in a drawer or keep them handy. So when you're ready to change out to the next season, they're ready to go. So we're going to make a pillow form. If you can find, or if you have a 10-inch pillow form, great, you're all set. Use those, order 3, go see what Amazon has, I don't know. But you can make a pillow form very easily. I've grabbed 2 pieces of muslin and I've cut them to be 10-inch square. When I make a pillow form, I generally like it to be about 1 inch larger than the pillow that I'm actually stuffing. I like a good, firm, stuffed pillow. So that's why I made it a little bit larger. I sewed a 1/4 inch all the way around, and I left about a 3-inch opening on the final side. In this case, I actually didn't even really, because it is a pillow insert, I didn't worry about trimming my corners or things like that. So this is meant to be inside and nobody sees it. You're going to turn it and you're going to stuff it. I did use just a fiber fill. A lot of times with my smalls, I do use a wool roving, but for something a little bit larger like this, a fiber fill is just fine. If I find these start getting a little droopy or lumpy or too compact, I can always open it back up and add a little bit more and refresh it. Okay, so once I stuffed it, I sewed my opening closed. Now, I did this on purpose. This is not the prettiest closure. If I was giving myself a grade, I'd probably tell myself to rip it out and do it again. But this is going inside, so nobody's going to see it. And I did it in whatever floss I had sitting there on the work table. And I did a color so that you could basically see. I just did a little whip stitch and I closed it. Again, not the prettiest, but it works. Then I'm ready to stuff my pillows. I start with the one corner and I work it in. I'm probably somebody has a tutorial of how to stuff an envelope style pillow, but I don't. But this is how I worked, and I probably could have, like I said, I really like a firmly stuffed pillow, so I probably could have left some of the stuffing out, but this worked for me. I just worked one corner in first and pushed it back to that far corner, and I got both sides in. I was very gentle with this because I didn't want to put any stress on any of my seams. It kind of looks like I'm trying to stuff an oversized sausage or something. Then I stuffed the opposite side. Now you'll notice my 2 back sides kind of splay a little bit. So my overlap is probably, I would say, a good 2 inches, 1.5 to 2 inches. That's nice because it does allow some give, but yet you still see fabric. You don't see the pillow, or the pillow form is not in danger of popping back out. In fact, that pillow form's not going anywhere at the moment. But I just like a really firmly stuffed pillow. So that's what the back looks like. And once the pillow form is in there, you can kind of move it around and work it a little bit. Just be gentle in the process, so we don't want to rip anything. And this is after I've completed my final pillows, and I was just playing with some of the arrangements. This was my original idea, is that I wanted to have a little spot throughout my home. I have spots where I like to change out seasonally. Obviously, some seasons I decorate more than others, but for this one, I just wanted just a little spot to brighten, literally when I go to change to the next season, it's going to take me 15 minutes to pull the pillow forms out and put them into the next season and tuck them in, maybe change the greenery out a little bit to something a bit more seasonal. And it's just a freshen up spot in the house. We live at home and work at home, and so I just always like to have something kind of fresh and new to look at as we relax. This was just a box that I found. I had originally been using a basket, which is why it was called the summer basket. So a basket, a box, any kind of container would work. And I might even change the container out seasonally. Who knows? I do like to rotate those around my house. This was just a container that I found at a large craft and hobby store in town, and some greenery. And I just the greenery actually in back helps those stand up. And I just sort of layered them in there. And like I said, just a bright little spot of color. As for storage, you'll see that cabinet that it's sitting on with those drawers and baskets and whatnot. That's probably where I will store the pillows in the off season because they'll lay flat, and I'll use the same pillow form that I made to put into the next season. Here's another little vignette. I was playing with the same basket, but look at completely different look, a little less greens. I brought in some berries and some little items that I keep in one of the cabinets here in the studio, and I thought it looked really pretty in the light. I was playing with a variety of settings. So again, just fun little pops of color, quilty, stitchy. I just love the whole combination of color and fabrics and detail. On photo shoot day, this was kind of a fun angle to see top down, and you see the nice edge of the pillows and all the little detail. And yet again, one more where you can see the fun detail of the big stitch quilting. I just really feel like it's a nice complement to the pieces. And there you go. That's my summer basket triple play pillow tutorial. I hope you enjoy that process. And now maybe sat through it one time and took some notes along the way with your measurements and whatnot, and you're ready to put your pillows together. Enjoy the stitch.